When you talk about board games, the component many people think of when they think of a board game are dice. These little six-sided babies have made people curse, swear, cheer, lose lots of money, gain lots of money. They're a key element to most mass-market board games and many hobby board games, but they can introduce randomness and sometimes chaos in the game. And we're going to talk about some of that chaos that's introduced with special dice here on this episode of Introspective. Welcome to Introspective. This is a web series where I take one element of a board game that's brought me a little bit of joy and unpack that element a little bit, explore games that are related to it, go off on a little bit of a tangent about that concept. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking about dice. So many people, when they start to make their first board game, they make a roll and move board game where you roll a six-sided die and you move the number of spaces that's on that die. The problem with that concept is a single six-sided die sets the values from 1 to 6 as being equally likely. So it's equally likely that someone will roll a 1 as they will roll a 6. And that's a big difference for randomness to generate someone being able to go ahead if you've got like a track you're moving on. And so I always encourage people to think a little bit more. Do they really want to have this wide range of 1 to 6 randomly generated? A lot of people think about like Clue. Clue is a game where you roll a die and you move 1 to 6 spaces, and based on how far you roll really determines how many interactions you make with the game in an interesting way. And the way I prefer to Clue is to just get rid of the die altogether, and on your turn just move to any location you'd like and make an accusation. It makes a much shorter game and gets straight to the interesting parts rather than rewarding the person who happened to roll higher. Now, there are ways to deal with that randomness. One way is to use 2 dice instead of 1. By using 2 dice, you now create a bell curve, where you're much more likely to have values that are in the middle, 6, 7, and 8, and much less likely to have these extreme values of 2 and 12. But that may be really extreme. Another tool you can use is to create an averaging die. So this would be a die that may have numbers, say, of 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, for example. Remove the 1 and the 6 and double up the 3 and the 4. And that's going to create that bell curve, same situation, without the extreme of going from 2 to 12. So that's one way that you can make a die roll work out better and constrain the possibilities so that it's a little bit more fair. Now there's a racing game that's built on that concept called Formula Day. So Formula Day uses dice, and so you may see this die and think, oh, that's just a 6-sided die. But if you look at it, it's not. It actually has 3 4s, 2 3s, and 1 2. So this helps you to get a number that's 2, 3, or 4. Half the time you're going to roll a 4. So they've used averaging dice concepts to make it so that people roll within a range, but it's more fair. It's not just a random equal chance of every number. And in this game, as your car goes up in gear, you use bigger dice. So you'll use D8s and D12s and D20s, and all the way up to the big monster 30-sided die. But like this 30-sided die doesn't have any number lower than 20 on it, because the idea is that you're going to roll high numbers. So this goes from 21 to 30. The D20 goes from 11 to 20. And the idea is that it constrains the range so that when you're racing, it's a little more fair, not completely determined by this wide variety of luck. Now, there's other ways that people have played with the chances of rolling certain things. And one of the mechanisms we've seen a little bit more recently in a number of games are dice that you can customize. So this is from a game called Dice Forge. And what happens in the game, everyone starts out with the same 6-sided dice, and we first saw this with Lego dice. Actually, Lego board games had dice that you could change the sides on. And so the idea is that you can take these sides off and replace them with other sides, which make the die do different things. So in the game, you have 2 of these dice, and as it goes on, you can change the face. So you might make this die always produce money, for example, and higher amounts of money, and this die do other effects. Based on your strategies you want to have in the game, you change out the faces of the dice. But what I want to really talk about in this game, and the thing that got me really excited to talk about this topic, is from this game, Chaos Marauders. Now, this is the original version. The Games Workshop version came out in 1987. And this had a die with it, which is a special die. Now, it may just look like a normal D6, with 5 sides being these little eyes and 1 side being the mark of chaos. But they warn you in the rules what to expect. As they say, if you look at the cube of devastation, you will see that although it has 6 sides, it does not resemble any other dice which you will have seen. Why is that? Well, let's watch it roll. That's right, the die is weighted. In fact, if you look, my old game here from 1987, the ink has actually worn off, and you can see the metal in the cube of devastation here that makes the die weighted. So the impact of this is that it is more likely not to land on this side. This side's really bad in the game. So if you roll this, really bad things happen. So in my tests, I found that it rolls this side about 1 in every 10 times, so it's less likely than the other sides, which is good because it's a really big effect and it happens. But it was exciting when you got this game and you'd roll the die and you're like, that looks funny, because you can see it just sort of tumbles and stumbles and creates drama in this die roll, as it should with that game. And that is something we haven't seen games work with, and I think it's an interesting mechanism that'd be worthwhile to explore. More games with dice that are weighted. Now, it's good they don't tell you that die is weighted. You can tell as soon as you pick it up, it feels funny, it rolls funny. I would like to see games where they tell you up front. You could even play with the swap-outable sides that have sides that weighed more than other sides, but that might have a great benefit, because if you put weight on a side, it's less likely to roll, but then you put another weight on the opposite side and makes it balance it. I think there's some interesting stuff to explore there, but I'll throw that to you to think about in your design. Because you could take dice and you can change the numbers on the faces to play with the numbers to make them go in different directions, or you can let people change things out, or you can just play with the laws of physics and add some weight to the dice, just like those wacky Brits did. And Games Workshop, back when they made board games, oh, those were the good old days. But anyway, I digress. And so I'd like to thank you for joining me on this little trip, this little tangent about dice and weighted dice here on Introspective. Have fun and roll them bones. Take care and bye-bye.